Iris wakes up one morning next to her husband with an empty, faraway look in her eyes. She's carrying a grief she can't shake. Without telling him where she's going, she grabs a folding knife, leaves her phone behind, and drives out through the valley into a forest until she reaches Mesibigur National Park. She parks and hikes up a trail to the top of a cliff, where a small memorial sits covered in flowers. It's for her son, Mateo, who fell to his death from this exact cliff during a family hike. Iris blames herself for it. She sets Mateo's favorite toy boat at the memorial, carves his initials into a tree next to her own and her husband's, then walks to the edge, ready to jump from the same spot where her son died. Before she can, a man named Richard shows up and interrupts her. He notices the boy's photo and the flowers and quickly figures out that Iris is Mateo's mother. He talks to her gently and shares his own loss. Years ago, he and his girlfriend had a violent argument while driving that ended in a crash. She was killed, and he spent nearly 2 months in the hospital with broken bones. Hearing that he's lost someone too, Iris finally opens up. She explains that while her husband was carving their names into a tree and she was picking wildflowers, Mateo wandered off to find a stick for roasting marshmallows. Neither of them noticed until it was too late. He fell, and they didn't even realize it was happening. That's what has haunted her ever since. Richard tells her that a broken heart doesn't mean all hope is gone. He doesn't push her toward any decision. He just points out how nice the weather is and how peaceful the view looks. Somehow, that's enough. Iris steps back from the edge and gives up on her plan. The two walk back down the trail together and reach the parking lot, ready to go their separate ways. But when Iris tries to get into her car, she can't open the door because Richard's vehicle is parked far too close. Instead of moving it, Richard steps out holding an umbrella. The sky is perfectly clear, which instantly feels wrong. Before she can react, he attacks her with an electric shock and knocks her out. And here's the twist. Richard was never a kind stranger who happened to save a grieving woman. He's a calculating psychopath who won her trust with warmth and sympathy so he could kidnap her and take her to his remote cabin. While she's unconscious, he ties her hands and feet and loads her into his vehicle. When Iris comes to, she's restrained and being driven deeper into the forest. She thinks about using her Apple Watch to call for help, but Richard stays completely calm. He tells her there's no signal out here and that she won't be able to do anything, just like all the women before her. That line reveals something horrifying. He's done this many times. He's kidnapped other women from the mountain, and none of them survived. When Iris warns him that her husband will come looking, he barely reacts. Every victim said the same thing. Then he hands her Mateo's toy boat, which he quietly took from the memorial. Iris keeps her cool. What Richard doesn't know is that she still has the small folding knife she brought to carve Mateo's name into the tree. He never found it while tying her up. Keeping him distracted, she slowly saws through the ropes until she's free, then throws herself at him. A brutal fight breaks out inside the vehicle. Iris frees her legs, grabs the toy boat, and threatens him with it. But Richard stays calm and pulls out a syringe. He already injected her during the struggle. He explains exactly what's coming. Within 20 minutes, she'll be fully paralyzed. First, she'll lose fine motor control and won't be able to grip anything. Around 10 minutes, her legs will tingle and weaken. By 15, she won't be able to move them at all. Soon after, her breathing will get harder, and before total paralysis takes over, she'll lose the ability to speak. This is don't move. Knowing she has almost no time, Iris runs into the forest with no real plan. Richard follows at a relaxed pace, letting the drug do the work. Right on schedule, her fingers stiffen and the smallest movements get harder. He catches up and tells her the paralysis will only last about an hour, but that doesn't help her now. Her legs start to tingle, and she forces herself to keep moving. Walking becomes almost impossible, so she drops down and crawls. She spots a large tree root and hides under it while Richard passes right above her. Then a swarm of aggressive ants crawls over her face and body. She tries to stay silent through the bites, but once Richard moves farther off, the pain becomes too much and she screams. She's still able to crawl, so she drags herself to a nearby river. The current grabs her and carries her downstream. With her body shutting down, she has no choice but to go where the water takes her. She survives the rough current, clings to a piece of wood near the bank, and pulls herself onto dry land. By now, her breathing is heavy, her body won't respond, and the paralysis finally reaches its last stage. Iris can't move at all. Then an elderly man named Bill rides by on a lawnmower. Iris has washed up near his property. Confused by the motionless woman in his yard, he tries to get a response and gets nothing. Eventually, he realizes she can still see and hear him, so he sets up a simple system. One blink means yes, two blinks mean no. Using that, he learns she isn't injured but can't move or speak. He decides to bring her to his house and call the police. Because of his age, Bill moves her using a small utility cart. He gets her inside and is about to call for help when someone starts pounding on the front door. Iris blinks frantically, trying to warn him. Bill hides her behind the sofa and answers. It's Richard. He plays the part of a worried husband, claiming he and his wife were in an accident and she's gone missing. He describes her and mentions he lost his phone in the crash. Bill is suspicious and asks him to wait outside, but Richard walks in anyway, saying he feels unwell and needs to rest. Bill gets ready to call the police on an intruder, and Richard suddenly breaks down like a grieving man. It works. Bill holds off on the call. Richard introduces himself with a different name, Andrew, and spins a detailed story about his wife's severe mental illness getting worse. He says she started accusing him of terrible things that never happened, and that he spent years hiding her condition so she won't be institutionalized again. He says she was driving on their trip because independence was good for her recovery, and after an argument caused a crash, she ran into the woods during a mental health episode. He even describes symptoms that match Iris exactly, saying her illness can make her body rigid and leave her unable to speak. The story slowly gets to Bill. He shares a bit about his own late wife, who died of a heart attack and used to scold him for his temper and his habit of fighting with people. Comparing that to Richard's story, Bill starts to believe this really might be Iris's husband. He's almost ready to tell him the truth. Then Richard's phone buzzes with a call. That single moment blows a hole in his story because he claimed he lost his phone. Bill turns suspicious again and tells Richard his wife is probably still out in the forest. But what Bill doesn't know is that Richard already spotted the utility cart in the kitchen. There's no reason for it to be there unless someone used it to move a person, so he's certain Iris is hidden somewhere on the property. Richard drops the act and demands to know where she is. Thinking fast, Bill lies and says she's in the shed. As Richard goes to check, Bill attacks him from behind and calls the police, reporting a dangerous man threatening his life. The fight spirals. Richard grabs a knife, and he fatally stabs Bill. But the emergency call stays connected the whole time. Dispatch hears the struggle, and several units are sent to the property. Richard rushes to the shed and finds nothing, so he assumes Iris crawled away. With police coming and evidence everywhere, he decides to burn the house down. Inside, Iris has just gotten a little movement back in her fingers and taps on the floor, hoping he'll hear her. She's now more afraid of burning alive than of being taken again. But Richard mistakes the tapping for gasoline dripping. He lights the house and heads for Bill's vehicle. Panicking, Iris notices the cord on a nearby window blind. Using everything she has left, she swings it back and forth. This time it works. Richard sees the movement, realizes she's still inside, and comes back for her. As they drive off, Richard casually admits that Bill was the first man he's ever killed. Then his phone rings again, and another shocking detail comes out. Richard has a family. He has a wife named Lizzie and a daughter named Olivia. On the call, Olivia shares that she got excellent grades, and Richard is genuinely happy for her. Lizzie plans to bring Olivia to the cabin the next morning. Richard usually spends weekends there to unwind, and his family thinks of it as a harmless getaway. This time, they want to join him, and he has little choice but to agree. It's a disturbing contrast. The same man who kidnaps and murders women is also a caring husband and a loving father, kind and attentive around his family. But now his plans with Iris are ruined, and with his family arriving the next day, he decides he needs to get rid of her before then. His fuel is running low, so he stops at a gas station. To avoid attention, he puts a hat on Iris and leaves her sitting in the vehicle. Fire trucks and ambulances race past toward Bill's burning house. While Richard goes in to pay, Iris fights to move and signal anyone nearby. But even the smallest motion is a struggle. She manages to unbuckle her seatbelt and shift closer to the window. A young boy walks up to the car and instantly reminds her of Mateo. His mother calls him away and warns him not to talk to strangers, but she notices something off about the silent woman inside. Richard drives Iris back to the site of the earlier crash. There he changes clothes, grabs another dose of the paralytic drug and some cable ties, and prepares to tow Bill's vehicle away. But before he can leave, a police officer named Donrell shows up. The suspicious mother from the gas station reported Bill's license plate, and that led Donrell straight here. Richard stays calm and says there's a misunderstanding. He claims he just picked up his wife after she crashed into a tree while drunk. Donrell checks his ID and points out several problems. The report said the couple was last seen at a gas station, not at a crash site, and Richard's forehead injury looks suspicious for a man who says his wife was the one driving. Meanwhile, Iris is getting movement back in her hands. She opens the car window and catches Donrell's attention. He comes over, but she's silent and barely responsive, so he assumes she might be drunk. Richard smoothly lies again, claiming Iris has been an alcoholic since their son Mateo died, and often wanders off and causes trouble. But Iris keeps fighting. She forces out a few weak sounds and gestures for Donrell to look under a section of the dashboard. When he does, he finds the syringe and the cable restraints. That instantly exposes Richard. But before Donrell can act, Richard attacks him, beats him, and kills him on the spot. He stuffs the body into a vehicle, takes the officer's pistol, removes the dash camera, and sets the patrol car on fire. In the chaos, he misses one thing. Iris has quietly taken the syringe. As they keep driving, Iris slowly gets her voice back. It's weak, but she uses it to get inside his head. She reminds him that tomorrow is supposed to be a big day, with his wife and daughter coming to see him. Then she brings up his past, the crash that killed his girlfriend and left him in the hospital for 2 months. To her, that was the moment he became a monster. That hits a nerve. Richard pulls over and starts opening up more than ever. He says that his whole life, from childhood on, he always felt ignored and unwanted, overlooked by society, dismissed by friends, neglected even by his own family. Then came the accident. Watching his girlfriend die, he felt something change. Instead of only grief, he felt a strange, powerful connection to life and death that he'd never felt before. He became convinced he had a godlike power to decide who lives and who dies. To him, it was never just murder. It was something spiritual and meaningful. Iris changes her approach. She points out that he clearly loves his family and that deep down he must know he can't keep this up forever. Sooner or later, he'll be caught, and he'll lose the people he cares about most. She pleads for her freedom, reminding him that she doesn't know where he lives and isn't even sure Richard is his real name. For a second, it looks like she's getting through, but only for a second. Richard snaps back. No matter what she promises, he can't risk it, because if she lives, she could go straight to the police, so he changes the plan. Instead of the cabin, he decides to take her straight to the place where he dumped his previous victims, which means crossing a lake. They drive down a remote road and reach a dock. The moment she gets a chance, Iris stabs him in the leg with the stolen syringe. But her body is still too weak, and her thumb can't fully push the plunger. Richard notices, pulls it out, and explains that the paralysis is wearing off, but her muscles still aren't working together. Now and then she can manage a single burst of strength, like that stab, but she can't fully support her own movements yet. He ties her hands again and forces her onto his boat. As they cross the lake, Iris notices a knife and a pistol tucked into his waistband. Then she suddenly breaks down crying as memories of Mateo flood back. Those tears are actually a sign that her body has nearly recovered. She can move close to normally again, and she uses that to set a trap. Pretending to be overwhelmed by grief, she asks Richard to take Mateo's toy boat out of her pocket. It's all an act. Her real goal is to get close to his weapons. The moment she gets her chance, she strikes. She grabs his knife and drives it through his neck, the blade going all the way through to his cheek. Then she takes his pistol and shoots him in the leg and the stomach. Badly wounded, Richard falls into the water and swims toward shore. For the first time since the nightmare began, Iris can finally breathe. But it's not over. The gunfire punctured the boat and water floods in. As it sinks, Iris is pulled under and holds her breath through one last struggle. She manages to escape and get out of the water. The paralysis has completely worn off now. She swims back to the dock and looks around. The lake and the trees feel different, and for the first time in a long while, she feels calm. Richard reaches the shore too, barely alive. Iris walks over to him one last time, and she has only one thing to say: thank you. As strange as it sounds, Richard was the person who saved her life at the start of all this. If he hadn't stopped her on that cliff, she never would have lived long enough to rediscover what life still had to offer. Fighting to escape him forced her to battle for every breath and every movement. And in the process, she realized how precious life really is. Iris has finally accepted Mateo's death, let go of the guilt that haunted her for so long, and found her will to live again. At last, she's ready to leave the past behind and start a new chapter. So the moral of the story is, if a stranger suddenly gives you free therapy on a cliff, maybe do a background check before accepting the deluxe kidnapping package.